everybody, and welcome to another World of Warcraft live developer Q&A. My name is Josh Allen, aka Community Manager Lore, joined here once again by Game Director Ian Hazakostas. We've been having a completely calm, casual, nothing to worry about all week.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is
really
fucked. Oh, shit.
I've been out there leveling my alts, enjoying my 90-second AVs.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's just a regular day in the World of Warcraft.
I'm going to turn off alerts. Yes. I'm turning off alerts.
So, did you want to say anything? Obviously, we've been working through some issues, and I believe
How about
we're doing some maintenance on North American realms as well.
Welcome to all you joining us because you're looking for something to do while North America is down briefly for restarts. So yeah, it's been an eventful couple days.
Okay, everything's been disabled.
You know, not the smoothest of pre-patch launches, not the experience that we wanted to deliver, not the experience we hope to deliver, not the experience you deserve, frankly. Couple different issues. I'll try to shed some light on them. Some of them were more technical than is really my area of expertise. But so I think in North America, especially on Tuesday, we just had a lot of issues with login.
Just say it got fucked.
Our account servers, and that was actually a lot of investigative work was done on that, and work was done to trace that back. Actually, not to communities themselves in terms of just the up and running, chat channels and the cross-server invites and all that, but actually the one-time process that was being run. Every time someone logged in as the first person in their guild to log in, it was doing a process that would migrate accounts over and convert that old guild to use the new community infrastructure. It's something we tested extensively. However, we didn't test it. We didn't think to, and there were complications in doing this with accounts in very old states, like many people that exist online today. Like if you look at your guild roster and there's someone in that guild who hasn't logged in 7 years, you might have some random alt lying around. There are people who are actually in guilds that go far enough back that they haven't logged in since Battle.net accounts existed.
That's not
actually a WoW account.
That's a graveyard.
Battle.net account.
That's a graveyard, dude.
A lot of those edge cases led to a significant amount of load on our account servers that basically brought things to a halt, impeded people's ability to log in, stopped the service from being as stable as it should have been. A lot of work was done over the course of Tuesday to diagnose and fix those issues. We're happy to be able to launch in Europe and in Asia with a much smoother overall experience, people able to get on, no meaningful downtime, and we're actually working right now to bring communities back online. The restarts that are happening in North America right now are actually tied to that. We wanted to make 100% sure that they weren't the problem before we re-enabled them, and we believe that to be the case, and so that's the path we're taking. Separately, I think once people got online, there have been a lot of gameplay, quality of life issues.
It was
things
fucked.
that are frustrating. You try to run a dungeon, and things are going mostly smoothly until you run into a boss that's one-shotting your tank with an ability, or you're doing an old raid.
They're going to say sorry. They're going to apologize.
There's a piece that wasn't properly squished or scaled.
Oh my god.
They're
admitting that they fucked up.
Stuff I just alluded to, and so on and so forth. Again, those are regrettable. It's what I'm going to say is really meant by way of explanation, not as an excuse, not as a justification. I want to try to shed some light onto the development process, but not really. The point here isn't, oh no, just deal with it, because you shouldn't have to. We should do better. We will do better in the future. We're already looking to see how we can improve our processes to make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen to the same extent in the future. And again, I know you've probably heard that before. But what we've undertaken in Battle for Azeroth and in the 8.0 patch was not just to squish and rescale our game, but also to do so in a way that would make doing so in the future simpler. Because in the past, when we did it in Warlords of Draenor, it was a painstaking manual process. It was hand editing literally tens of thousands of spells, creatures, applying, dividing it by 25, multiplying it by whatever, and a lot of manual error happened in the process, but also it was incredibly just error-prone and painstaking and laborious. So what we did this time around was actually convert the guts of a lot of our combat system, a lot of our
each one
numbers,
a scale.
Or spells or items to be inherently more scalable under the hood.
That's
so
right.
That in the future, We can just turn a knob. If we want to lower everything by 20%, we can just do that without having to hand edit all of those records.
Well, at least now we know nothing will go wrong.
What that means, though, is that conversion process is literally touching basically 8 games worth of content. When we make that's the reality we live in today in World of Warcraft. It's not just Battle for Azeroth. When we make a code change that affects mob pathing, when we make we fix a bug that is causing some AI actions to not occur correctly.
I turned them off.
That can have ripple effects on basically 7 past games worth of content. Something made in 2008 that's worked fine for 9 years. Actually, it turns out there was actually some subtle bug there that just wasn't actually manifesting itself because of a separate issue that we now fixed that now causes that thing way back then to break. Anyway, what that results in is across, we have something like 250,000 spells in the game at this point, 150,000 creatures, tens of thousands of quests. We found and fixed a lot of these issues internally. Many of them with the help from feedback from our testers and people on beta on PTR. We fixed tens of thousands of bugs, literally, in both Battle for Azeroth and legacy content, thanks to submitted feedback reports within our beta and PTR clients. But there's more out there, and we're in the process actively right now of following up on every bit of community feedback we're getting, all these reports, and stopping them as quickly as possible. We're literally fixing hundreds a day at this point. All I can ask really is for your patience just for the next, hopefully just day or two. I think what you experienced yesterday is the worst it will ever be. Today is better.
Far.
Tomorrow will be better still.
So far.
And I think hopefully within just a matter of a few days, all aspects of the experience, whether it's doing Legion raids and dungeons, whether it's leveling up, will be smooth and as you've known and expect and deserve. Along with patience, when giving feedback, I think one of the most important things in terms of, completely understand if you're just frustrated and want to vent, everyone is entitled to that. But if you're trying to give information that will help us fix an issue, I think the more specificity, the better. If it's Prince Tortheldrin's Whirlwind one-shots me and does double my health, that is an easily fixable issue. We, in fact, literally just fixed that an hour ago. It was something that was meant to do 600 damage, was doing 600% of an attack's damage, which, as it turns out, is a bad thing.
I can't fix the alerts.
Making games, man.
I can't fix them.
If only
I turned it off, and they just won't turn off. I clicked disable, but it doesn't disable them. What can I do?
Feedback, super helpful. I tried to run a dungeon and it was impossible.
I don't understand why this isn't.
Again,
they're just
appreciate the sentiment, understand the frustration.
Turn them off in OBS. I can't.
The more actionable feedback we can get, the more quickly we can track down and fix every one of these issues. And again,
why does nothing work?
On behalf of the team, we should have done better. You deserve better. And all we're doing right now is working as hard, as quickly as we can to fix all of those issues. And then the next step will be looking at our processes and trying to understand what we can do to make it better next time around.
Yeah. And it's worth noting as well, like a huge part of why we do a pre-patch and why we, when we do release the pre-patch, we don't immediately come out with the new content, because obviously there's some new content coming even in this time frame over the next few weeks. Part of the reason that we do it like this is so that if everything does go wrong, well, not everything went wrong, but if a whole bunch of things go wrong when we first release it, it's not removing your ability to go out and do the new stuff that we've just released. So, yeah, it sucks that it happened, but at least it happened the way that it did, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And
yes.
I know I've seen speculation of, oh God, if pre-patch was this bad, how are they ever going to do the global launch of Battle for Azeroth next month? I think part of it is actually Battle for Azeroth is on your hard drive right now. The game data, the code is running on our servers. It's running on your machines. And so everything we're doing right now is helping to ensure a smooth, stable, fun launch experience in just a few weeks.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and move on and get started on some questions.
Absolutely.
First one comes from, I think I'm going to say John C. is how I'll say this.
Sure.
I'm just guessing.
Who cares?
Says, why can't I use Mage Tower appearances on my second monk when I've completed them on my first?
Nobody gives a fuck.
So,
nobody cares.
So, the way that works.
Why do you have two monks?
Is that
delete them both?
If you are using an artifact weapon,
fucking
the way you change the look of your artifact weapon is at the artifact forge in your class hall. That is a character-specific unlock system, and that's what it's checking. Down the line, when you're using a different weapon, later on in Battle for Azeroth, the transmog appearance associated with your artifact that you've earned should be account-wide as long as you've earned it and meet the class and spec requirements. So that is to say, if you have a second monk that didn't earn the Mage Tower appearances, but your first monk did, monk number 2 will be able to use those transmogs.
Awesome.
Yeah, you said that.
That was quick and easy. Moving on to the next question. This comes from Phobos, who says, when will Warlocks get their new caster animations? They're still the only class who don't have the new spell animations or the spell idle animation.
They do have new
We actually had a lot of people asking about this, sort of remembering back. We did a whole bunch of work to improve caster animations towards the middle/end of Legion.
What about the game?
People wondering when Warlocks are going to get that treatment.
What about that?
Okay, so Warlocks have seen a whole suite of new visuals associated with their spells.
Talk about the game?
In the 8.0 pre-patch. But
there
are a couple new animations. They are on spells like Hand of Gul'dan right now.
Yes,
others.
yes.
We are looking to continue to expand the range of spells that have custom animations. I think the unique Warlock anims are more suited towards, they feel more like pulling energy out from the ground, or you're summoning something from another dimension, less for a lot of their current spells in terms of feel and flavor. So we're looking into what we can do about that. As with all of this, class fidelity improvements, animations, visuals, that's an ongoing process that we never really are truly considering done. We always want to improve the look and feel of the core abilities in combat that are
wow, you're trying to make the game better. What a big surprise.
Moving on. Next question here from Socially Panda, who said, so the bonus for doing random dungeons has been
this is a really good question.
Why has Blizzard decided to heavily nerf running random dungeons even more when questing is already faster unless you're a tank or a healer?
This is a bug. It's definitely not intended. I think there's a possibility. We're looking into it right now. It may just be a display issue where you open your dungeon queue, especially in level up dungeons, and it says, this reward, you're eligible for this reward one more time this week. That should be this day. If that's not how it's behaving, then it will certainly be changed one way or another, either to look correctly or function correctly in the very near future. No intent whatsoever to nerf dungeon experience.
Good.
Great. Bonus for doing a random one on a daily basis. Also related, we've heard some feedback asking, well, what happened to the experience from the end of dungeon scenario? Set of objectives at the side.
This is important.
You finish that, you used to get a big burst of experience. That that is no longer there. However, we just rolled it onto the final boss of the dungeon. Something we found was that most people didn't actually notice they were getting experience from that source. A lot of stuff's going on at that point. You killed the last boss, you're getting your loot, you just got some mystery experience from nowhere. Whereas on the final boss, when you finish it off, get that killing blow, you'll see a big XP number pop up that is hopefully a bit more obvious. The intent here is not to reduce the amount of experience you're getting from dungeons in any way, shape, or form. If that's how it's appearing, there may still be some bugs we're looking at, but not the intent.
Okay. Cool. Moving right along, question here from Nahela, who said, Legacy loot was recently changed to be listed as more than 10 levels instead of 10 or more. Any reason for this change or any chance of it going back? This currently extremely restricts previous expansion transmog hunting. So basically talking about...
Tell me it's a bug, Ian.
If it requires...
Tell me it's a fucking bug.
...that you be 11 levels above
Tell me it's a bug.
Then that means that in BFA, Legion raids wouldn't have Legacy loot.
We know.
Currently in Legion... Warlords doesn't have,
and that's how it's always been implemented. It wasn't changed at any point. I think there was maybe a time where a couple of community sites or something that we put out said 10 levels.
Yeah, I think we had a blog post that had. Yeah.
But it's always been intended to be more than one expansion behind.
Why?
So for Warlords, that does mean that in just a few weeks, as soon as you level to 111 or beyond, that system will apply for all Warlords raids.
Why?
Also, the other change that happens at the same time is once an expansion is no longer current at all. So in a level 120
is WoD current now?
Legion raids will shift to a system where they always drop a minimum number of loots within personal loot based on the raid size. So you'll always get 2 loots as if you had 10 players present, even if you're soloing a Legion raid. Though it's probably going to be pretty challenging to solo Legion raids early on, and that's part of.
But it gave you 20 in Legacy
here, in terms of what this loot system applies to. In general, raids 2 expansions ago are what becomes part of people's solo transmog loops.
Yeah, if you
Warlords
suck.
was a little bit of an exception because of the amount of raw power that the artifact gave players over the course of an expansion. I think if you think back to Warlords, other than, sort of extreme soloists who were, using every trick in the book, and the Myones of the world. We didn't really see people soloing difficult Mists raids, especially early on in Warlords. That's probably going to be what plays out in the future. So that's typically more of a group activity where you bring a couple of friends with you if you want to try to run them. But then once things fully graduate into this is soloable legacy content, that's when legacy loot mode kicks in, and that's kind of signaling that, okay, this is now free-for-all solo content. We're going to give you a significantly more generous amount of loot, and you'll be able to complete your transmog collection a bit more quickly, especially if you bring a couple of people with you so that you can make use of all of the non-class restricted pieces that drop.
Cool. Yeah, it makes sense too. It's like, I personally, I think it's nice to let the previous, because you've just come off an expansion, you've just been going through all these raids, you've just been putting a ton of time and effort into killing these bosses, and to have them then 2 days later just be like sort of face roll, you can just go in there and knock everybody over. That's kind of.
That's so fucking stupid.
Exactly. That's basically the.
That is so stupid.
I mean, and to be clear, there's also some lack of clarity, lack of communication on our end about how the combat bonuses work with regard to legacy content. It's those only, like, if we had, just to be clear, if we had never done a stat squish ever, including in Warlords, those bonuses would not exist in any way, shape, or form. They only exist to recreate
just
the
give
power
us
gap
WoD
that the
legacy
squish
loot
removed.
mode.
Like, if we hadn't done a stat squish,
just give it to us.
I'm gonna
why
some
not?
Numbers.
That's
here.
so
I'm not sure if
stupid.
these are totally accurate. As I recall, late Mists, when people were in Siege of Orgrimmar back in 2014, players were doing 500,000 DPS, 600,000 DPS. Players had health in the low millions. If we hadn't squished, well, in Warlords, you would have seen people doing 5, 6, 7 million DPS routinely. In Legion, you would have seen people doing probably 40 million DPS, 50 million DPS because of the amount of power growth that happened with the artifact. And you would have just been able, while doing 50 million DPS, to just go back and kill Heroic Lich King with his 100 million health unsquished in just a few seconds without us helping you at all. Like, that's the natural power progression throughout WoW.
Yes.
Roughly, you probably quadruple in power from expansion to expansion every couple of years. As
that's
you get
a great system.
Another 150 or so item levels over the course of an expansion.
Just kidding.
So that means that one expansion later, you're about as strong as a dungeon group was in the prior expansion. 2 expansions later, you're as strong as a raid group, and that's really when raid content becomes soloable for most people. Again, extreme cases, people with the very best gear and certain specs or classes can push that out farther.
Says you're offline. Cool. It shows me as online right now.
Let's move on. Next question here comes from
I just
Squishy,
refreshed.
who asked, "What is the reasoning behind, behind Azerite
it shows me as online
armor
right
and
now.
mythic raid mounts being untradeable while on personal loot? Is this a bug or intended?"
Yeah, it got fixed.
So,
we're fine.
No and yes. With respect to mythic raid mounts, those should actually be tradable while on personal loot. The Shackled Urzul from Mythic Argus, that was actually a bug. It is tradable right now freely, no matter who gets it.
Great.
If you go kill that boss today.
That is awesome.
How the Gul'dan mount had worked on Mythic. That's how Mythic mount should work going forward. There's players, understandably, especially at Mythic cutting edge level, when you're getting those mounts, want to allocate those mounts in a world where they're only going to get a handful of them, perhaps, depending on how long they're farming the tier.
How can they allocate them with personal loot?
And so that's not something we want to get in the way of.
That's the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard. How can you allocate it if it's on personal?
One is,
if you admit that's an issue, why are you forcing personal?
Evaluating these items, because they do fundamentally completely different things depending on
you
who
can trade it.
Like a piece of leather that's
of course,
Azerite
there's nothing that's going to go wrong
being
there.
Looked at by a druid, a rogue, and a demon hunter will have entirely separate powers for each of those classes, and it's different than looking at an item that has crit or haste and knowing, okay, this is better for this person than that person. I'm going to trade it to them. There's a very complex evaluation and sharing of information that would occur if you're trying to figure out why something is or isn't better, that goes beyond what is really awkward, what isn't awkward to have as a conversation in party chat or in raid chat. But separately, our philosophy when it comes to tradability of personal loot, really, we err on the side of making it as unlikely as possible that someone will ever feel pressured to give away an upgrade that is an upgrade for them, an item that they want to use for their personal power and their personal benefit, but the pug leader says, give that to so-and-so or I'm going to kick you, or whatever social structure you're in is making you part with that against really what you'd prefer. And normally, item level is a pretty good guide. And if you have something in the same slot, okay, maybe it's a psi grade, maybe the secondary stats are slightly better. But with Azerite armor, while yes, item level is important and will generally determine which is better when you're talking about gear for the same spec, there are many different trait combinations, and you may want this piece that is the same eye level for a different loadout, or it may simply have better traits that you want to use that you've been excited to see. And there's value in being able to, without guilt or feeling selfish, collect a couple of sets of shoulders or a couple of helms so that you can better customize your own gameplay and tailor yourself towards one spec or the other, or better AoE, better single target, without feeling like you were doing so at the expense of someone else in your group and that you're having to selfishly defend your desire to hold on to the item. This way, they'll get theirs, you'll get yours, it'll work itself out.
So you admit this will be a problem?
Cool.
With
Moving
other
right
pieces.
along, next question from Mad1, who said, I love the MDI, but most teams ran similar comps. Blood DK, Holy Paladin, or Resto Druid, and a subset of the same 5 or 6 DPS specs. What changes are you making to encourage more variety at the highest levels?
Okay, so a few layers to this question. There was definitely some factors about the format of the MDI that made it not totally representative of the game on live servers. Some of that was the way we scaled players' gear. On the DPS spec side, this is something we fixed very, very late in the process, right before the global finals. But through most of the qualifying rounds and the regionals, players' entire gear sets were set to a fixed item level, which meant that your artifact weapon was actually the same eye level as the rest of your gear, which was different from the norm on live servers in Legion, where your artifact would generally be 20 eye levels or so higher. That change was basically most painful to those who relied most on their weapons. It actually heavily nerfed hunters, while it made monks, who were mostly weapon agnostic in a lot of their abilities, comparatively better. And so that's why you saw things like people who played hunters at a very expert level on live running with monk in the MDI. It was just because of that quirk of the format, which was a problem with the format,
really
and something we're fixing going forward.
You don't
Separately,
say.
A lot of the format of the MDI, there were times where we were allowing players to pick the affixes for the next round, or to pick one of the affixes for the next map, or we had a limited affix pool that players were cycling among, and players would often avoid some of the affixes that penalized certain strategies or certain compositions. You didn't see a whole lot of bursting, you didn't see a whole lot of bolstering,
because it
for example,
sucks
over the course of the entire run. Now, those are MDI specific things. Now, obviously, Blood DKs were by far the dominant tank throughout the course of Legion for Mythic Dungeons on live. Holy Paladin and Resto Druid, similarly the dominant healers at the very high end. I think some of that is a quirk of just the amount of self-healing and survivability that Blood Death Knights had.
It's because they're better.
As well as other advantages like anti-AMS and the like. For Holy Paladin
what
and
about
Resto Druid,
consumption?
A lot of it was a product of just the consistently increased health pool they had, whether it was baseline as Holy Paladin or the ability to go bare without a cooldown to survive abilities that would one-shot others.
When are we going to get to the Archimon Dick
some
question?
of that has been adjusted on a class balance level, but separately, I think we can and want to go further with how affixes very optimal composition.
This is important.
And can be disruptive. I think Necrotic in some ways was actually designed as an affix to counter the Blood Death Knight. The less mobile, self-healing reliant tank, well, you have this stacking debuff on you that's going to reduce your ability to heal yourself, theoretically crippling. Okay, well, except you have AMS in conjunction with a legendary that lets you actually, clear and avoid those stacks and reset them, perhaps with more comfort and more ease than many other specs. Well, that just broke that, and that's something internally we needed to do a better job.
You just made it to where you couldn't AMS necrotic stacks.
The goal should be that there should not be a single best comp for all affixes. It may be that when it is, some combination X, you name it. Some specs will fare better than others. Things like Volcanic are designed to naturally punish ranged a little bit more, especially ranged that suffer from movement, because it keeps them on their toes, keeps them from being able to settle into a pattern. Explosives, are harsher if you're not as great at rapid target switching, and so on and so forth. That's something we want to push farther where possible, so that you actually are, thinking about the affix combination for the week, grateful that you have spec X versus spec Y, and then that will change the next week, and so on and so forth, so that everyone gets their moment to shine.
Yeah.
And again, not to extremes, not to the point where with a given affix combination there's no point bringing
turn off R9K.
But we want to get away from a world where
we don't need R9K.
Like we saw at the end of Legion.
Yeah, it's one of the more interesting and I kind of think more effective ways of making sure everybody has that sort of moment to feel like your spec is really bringing an advantage to the group and everything, is just to make sure that things get mixed up enough. It's something we see in raid design as well, where like this boss is the boss where all of a sudden specifically for targets for whatever reason is like everybody who's optimized for just that is going to be doing really well here and such. So it's interesting.
Exactly. I think that's a huge part of really the interplay between our encounter design and our class design teams.
You can time out that spamming piece of shit
situations in all of our encounters, including
I don't want one person
just
spamming
about everywhere.
I want one person
play
spamming.
To the strengths and weaknesses of our classes. And then similarly and related, when there are classes or specs that don't have those niches, that don't have the moments that really allow them to shine, that's a problem for us to solve on the class design side. And that's increasingly when you see us aiming for and valuing diversity and moving away from diversity. And sometimes that means taking things away from some specs to make them more special for others. We want to create a world where everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, everyone has their moments where they can shine, and the moments where they are jealous of a little bit of the moments where they are jealous a little bit of those around them, and I think that's healthy for the game as a whole.
Yes, I agree with that. That's a good question. Let's
go ahead and move on. Next question comes from Asmongold, who says,
"Shit, I thought that was me."
Quote unquote seasons last until the next major patch, or will 8.x.5 patches see a new affix? So how are those going to work?
So I think increasingly patches are delivering content or delivering data to your hard drives, but that content will be unlocked at a time that is appropriate for the pacing of the game as a whole. So, and as we saw in Legion, that means raids don't necessarily open on patch day, or questline doesn't necessarily become available right the moment a patch drops.
No, it takes a month.
Mythic Plus seasons, I think we're looking to set up a structure where our end game progression or end game reward systems have a parallel structure, parallel cadence. That means a new raid tier, a new Mythic Keystone season, and a new PvP season. Those three things are really your major sources of end game rewards, or the best loot in the game, the greatest challenges in the game. And so we'd imagine that all three would begin at the same time. So when the next raid tier begins, that's also when the new affix would become available. That's also when the new PvP season would start with its rewards. And I think that adds some structure to the expansion of the patch cycle as a whole. Also lets us better balance the rewards from those different types of content against one another.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Talk about mounts.
On something you were talking about a second ago. I think it's interesting to
what is the mount question?
Sort of, I guess, clarify the reasoning behind why we don't just say it's patch day, everything is available and unlocked right now. And I actually think patch 7.1 was a really great example of this, because that actually contained, if I'm remembering correctly, that contained all of the information, all the data that was needed for Nighthold. But everyone was still in the middle of, well, not everyone, but most people were still in the middle of progressing through Emerald Nightmare.
Exactly. Nighthold was actually in 7.0 for the most part. I mean, there was tuning and bug fixes and things that happened based on PTR, but yes, in 7.1 had new quests. It had Karazhan. It had Trial of Valor. Karazhan was open day one. Trial of Valor we didn't open until a month later for the exact reason that you said, right? And same way with 7.2, we went to the Broken Shore, but Tomb of Sargeras did not open for several more months, because while players were at that point, maybe a little bit sick of the original Broken Isle zones, looking for something new.
Right.
It was great to be able to go to a new outdoor zone for that. No one was ready for a new raid at that point. Nighthold was only a few months old, and so we want to be able to pace the individual pieces of content to really suit their own structure and what's right for players.
Yep. It makes a lot of sense. I know I certainly don't miss the days of, hey, everybody, there's a patch on Tuesday. Quick, let's scramble and finish this raid that's been out for 5 months.
Yep.
Just saying. Next question comes from Keith, who said, you mentioned in another Q&A that class development would be put to a later date after the expansion launches. Can you tell us when that will be?
Next expansion. Just say it.
Class changes.
Next expansion.
Is an ongoing process. I think maybe this is referring to in the last Q&A, as we knew we were really the window was closing for major changes in the Battle for Azeroth pre-patch. I was trying to set expectations for people who hadn't yet seen changes that they were hoping for, because they weren't going to come in 8.0. There will certainly be more in 8.1. There's a list of specs we've discussed in the past that are due for some further attention, but we're also going to be doing ongoing tuning and balancing, in real time, really, based on some of it's going to be based on things we're seeing on live right now, just to make sure that endgame balance just for these next few weeks isn't too wacky. But then the majority of our attention is going to be focused on that initial 120 experience and making sure that all specs are competitive, all specs are viable in a range of content types, looking at specific talents that are unpopular, talents that are dominant that everyone takes in a row because they're either too good or the other ones aren't good enough. Similarly, looking at Azerite traits and their tuning, and which are popular, which are unpopular, which are too strong, which are not. Those numerical changes really never stop and are often just done in the flow of the live game. And then it'll be patches where changes to talents, redesign of talents occurs, where new abilities get added, where that sort of thing happens. And that's 8.1 and beyond.
Okay. Moving on, next question from Zajara, who said, as a Horde player, I find myself with little reason to hate the Alliance or take pride in the Horde right now. Is this an intended phase 1 for future twists and turns? So obviously, Sylvanas has been up to some shenanigans lately.
Sylvanas is back again.
So it's hard for me to fully answer this without getting into spoilers.
Sure.
I think what I can say, what I can say to players of the Horde, to fans of the Horde, to Horde loyalists, is
fuck you.
Not to lose heart. That you're not necessarily wrong to be alarmed, to be dismayed at some of the actions that you're seeing, but there is more to the picture that has yet to be revealed.
Oh, so she's morally gray. I see.
Heart of the Horde
okay.
still beats, and there are many who are ready to take up that banner and carry it for in the name of the Horde, for honor, and all the rest.
Get rid of Sylvanas.
And that's a story that will play out. There are many facets to the Horde. I think one of the interesting things about the Horde
put her in jail.
It represents a unity of different groups with different philosophies, different outlooks on life, really, that are brought together by sometimes tenuous bonds, but that work best when they are actually, truly acting in unison. If you look at, the orcs and, it's blood and honor and glory and savage existence.
That's a good point.
Look at the Forsaken.
Yeah, lock her up, dude.
Sylvanas' outlook. A bit more selfish, a bit more about free will, about ensuring that they're not going to be beneath the boot of another. Look at the Tauren, walking in the steps of the Earth Mother and their closeness to nature, and so on and so forth. And goblins with, avarice and ingenuity. Wide range of motivations, wide range of races that are bound together into this Horde. And so it's natural that there are going to be tensions. It's natural that there are going to be questions raised as to what is the Horde really? What is its purpose? What are its guiding values? And I think we're going to see that with both factions as they're clashing in battle over the course of the expansion to come. Both are also going to be left to look inward and reflect upon what motivates them, what their true nature is, and what they're fighting for.
Cool. Etc.
Cool.
Next question from Bladebuster, who said, any plans for a solution to not have a stat squish every other expansion?
Great question.
We had one in Warlords.
Great question.
We had Legion, and now we're having one in Battle for Azeroth.
Yes.
Is there a long-term way that we can make that not necessary?
We would love one. We have yet to come up with one, honestly. I think the problem is...
don't make 5 levels of growth in a tier.
Maybe some complete reimagining of our combat system that scales relative power without, scaling absolute numbers in the same way. That's more, multiplicative or exponential in nature.
This is just what we're going to get. This is what we get.
Theoretical math that could happen, but obviously reinventing our entire combat system is a daunting prospect. That's not something that, is without tons and tons of risks.
Reinvent the progression system.
Power progression is important to the game, and I think we've constantly see feedback and people asking on forums, on Twitter, elsewhere, like, can't you just stop making the numbers so big? Why do we need all this power? Why do we need all this progression? It feels like too much.
Yeah.
And the answer is it's because we have large numbers of content tiers, and through experimentation in the past, I think we've played with different gaps in power level between tiers. We found that where we've settled right now, 15 item levels, about 15% power is a gap between normal and heroic and mythic, and between tiers themselves. That's about what it takes for upgrades to feel consistently rewarding and meaningful.
Right.
You know, I think, well, yeah, we could totally stop power creep if you replaced your, 120 strength helm with 121 strength helm, and that was like, okay, congratulations, you spent 2 weeks trying to down this boss, you finally mastered the fight, here's your extra 0.2% player power as a reward. That doesn't feel particularly worthwhile, both psychologically, but also it makes it almost impossible for us to balance around gear checks. How do we make the fight that really requires you to have 121 strength to beat, and 120 strength, you're not going to be good enough unless you are the very, very best players in the world. And progression feels good in that sense, right? The same piece of content, whether it's a heroic raid boss, whether it's a mage tower challenge, can be a cutting-edge test of skill for the first players that get there with the worst possible gear, while then being still